Spring practice is about to start. That means 2025 recruiting is going to start heating up. On today's episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast, we're giving updates on two recruitments in the 2025 class, Isaac Sowells and Keon Young. With that being said, let's get right on into the show.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today, and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. As always, I want to personally thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder that the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your team every day. Spring practice is right around the corner. We've said it over and over. Just to tell you that 2025 recruiting will start to heat up here in the upcoming weeks. We're going to give updates on two notable recruits. 2025 three-star interior offensive lineman Isaac Sowells and four-star safety Keon Young. Both have released their top 10s, and we're going to discuss Louisville's chances. We'll also dive into a weekly mailbag segment. So before we discuss Sowells and Young, I think it is critical that we discuss where Louisville is at in the 2025 recruiting cycle. Right now, they currently have three commitments. They have a quarterback commitment from Mason Mims. They also have two offensive line commitments. Jake Cook, interior offensive lineman from Westerville, Ohio. Grady Anthony, interior offensive lineman from North Oldham High School, just outside of the city of Louisville. But speaking of Grady Anthony, he is not the only local offensive line prospect that the Cardinals are going after. Isaac Sowells, interior offensive lineman from my alma mater, Louisville Male High School, has just released his top 10. Louisville did make the list alongside Miami, NC State, South Carolina, Kentucky, West Virginia, Penn State, Indiana, Virginia, and Vanderbilt. So a ton of Power 5 flavor across the ACC, SEC, Big Ten. Very good level of opportunities for Isaac Spike Sowells. I think Spike is his nickname according to all the recruiting services. But right now, the 6'2", 293-pound native of the 502 is ranked as the 701st best player, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite, 55th best interior offensive lineman, and 5th best player in the state of Kentucky. Now, if you remember, this was probably about a month ago, we talked about some local recruits to start to get to know about. And Sowells was one of them. And for two reasons, I think this recruitment is extremely notable for the Cardinals and why the Cardinals should be prioritizing it. Number one, he's a local guy. The Male Bulldogs football program has been very kind to the Cardinals program really ever since I've been alive. You talk about Michael Bush, Doug Beaumont, Keon Wakefield, Dexter Heyman. That list goes on. However, I will say that in the same regard, there is some concern as to, whether or not local recruiting is the way to go for the Cardinals. After all, Brian Smith, the Locked On Podcast Network national recruiting analyst, stated on last week's show that college coaches don't put a ton of emphasis on recruiting in the state of Kentucky because there's just not that many standouts. The level of competition is not great, and they don't prioritize football like the states in the South and some other places. Look, Kentucky's a basketball state. What does football really have in terms of overall significance? Well, I think that there's levels to it, and this is where scouting comes to play, and you really have to focus on who you're going after. But Jeff Brom has also made it a point of emphasis that, hey, I'm here, and that means the negligence of local recruiting is no more. We are going to, set up a parameter of anyone within, I think it was a 5-hour radius is going to be recruited. Every stone will be unturned. And I like that approach. Now, you have to obviously understand the notion that not every player in the state of Kentucky is going to be able to play at Louisville level, but there's exceptions to everything. It's not black and white. Everything is sort of in that gray area. So it's all about recruiting. Grady Anthony is a guy that is going to see his recruiting ranking rise more and more. He's just outside of the top 800 after a very good performance at the Best of the Midwest camp. Steve Wiltfong, national recruiting analyst for 24/7 Sports, was extremely high on Anthony's performance. Isaac Sowells, number one, he fills a local trend, and that is locking down the state. Let's face it, the Cardinals outside of the Derby city limits are going to be fighting an uphill battle. This is a blue state, unfortunately, outside of the 502. And past couple of years, it's been a blue city in terms of high school recruiting. Brom said, "Well, let's pump the brakes here. Let's address that." And I like that. You got Grady Anthony, you got some other local guys. It makes a ton of sense. Lou Spencer last year, Micah Carter, Sadiq Clemens, the list goes on. Sowells has included Kentucky in his list. He just visited the Wildcats program, and you best believe that they are going to be putting the full court press on a very good interior offensive line prospect. And for me, if Louisville's able to win these key recruiting battles for some of the city's premier athletes, we said it once in 2022 back in December, and we'll say it again. It pushes the narrative and the trend towards Louisville's favor that, hey, look, going 60 something miles east down I-64 is not the move anymore. Stay here and become a hometown hero and help your team win football games. I like that trend, and that's one reason why I feel like Sowells is a player that the Cardinals should prioritize. But it is justified by the second reason, and that is positional value. Sowells is a center candidate, can play the center position, can play on the interior. Louisville just lost Brian Hudson to graduation. Right now you have Austin Collins, Pete Nigra, who are two veteran level guys. Outside of that, there's no succession plan seemingly for the Cardinals at the spot. And I would like to have a center that is a multiple year player that can be able to start a couple seasons. And I think Sowells has that potential. Now, is he a player that's going to come in right away, year one, be the center? Probably not. I feel like that's a pretty tough position to learn, especially since the importance of that position cannot be understated. And if it doesn't work out for him at center, he can still play either of the guard spots, so you have that flexibility. I understand you have 2 commitments so far from offensive linemen, but I think that you're going to take a couple more, and it makes sense here for a guy like Sowells because he can play that center position. That is such a key thing to focus on. He was an instrumental part of this male rushing offense. Now, for those who don't really follow Kentucky high school football, male is an offense that likes to establish the run, and one way they do that is by having a fantastic offensive line. Back when I went to Male, when we won the state championship back in 2015, one of the reasons why we were so good was because the offensive line was larger than any defensive line even comparable. Now, you can actually talk about the level of competition, and I get it. It is what it is. When you play St. X, Trinity, some other teams that have very good defensive lines, I think that it begs the question that, hey, look, you're still going up against some pretty solid players. So I say all that to say that Chris Wolf's MO at Male offensively is setting the tone in the trenches to allow the run to flourish and the pass to feed off of the run. Sowells is an integral part of that equation, and I think he's got pretty solid size right away. I mean, the offer sheet speaks for itself, and I think that it's a no-brainer for me. His father was a 4th-round pick of the Cleveland in 2006, played for the Indiana Hoosiers, spent time with the Bengals and the Lions, so he's got that pedigree of NFL lineage. But Sowells is a guy that's also been onto Louisville's campus a ton. He's at basketball games. He was at junior day back in January. He's been to football games. The familiarity for Sowells within this program, it's right there. So you have to believe that you're right there in that recruitment. So if you prioritize him and you go after that commitment and you end up getting it, I think it builds a solid nucleus that the Cardinals can build around at the offensive line position. And it checks off a couple boxes. Number one, from a skill set perspective, yeah, I think Sowells brings very, very solid skill set to the mix. Solid hands, solid footwork, a tenacity on the interior, great motor, and very good at using his hands for leverage. So you have the skill set trajectory, the optics, winning a local recruiting battle against Kentucky, among others. It looks good for the program in terms of local recruiting. And then overall, you are addressing the future at the offensive line spot. And you don't require him to play right away. You allow him a season to be able to learn, to grow, to get his body right, and to learn the college way of things. And at that point, you're sitting in a good spot. So ultimately, Isaac Sowells, including Louisville in his top 10, shouldn't really tell you much other than that it's starting to get more serious, and you're going to see guys release top 10s and start to schedule visits. So I think the next thing is getting him on campus throughout the spring. He's going to be traveling a lot, but getting him on campus for spring and the spring game would be big time. So Isaac Sowells, including Louisville in his top 10. The other prospect we're going to talk about today has not included Louisville in his recent top 10, but he announced that Louisville has reoffered him. Can the Cardinals get in on Keon Young's recruitment? Well, that is the million-dollar question that we're going to try to answer here momentarily after we talk about our friends and the title sponsor of the show, FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with the quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel is the official partner of the NBA. Hey, Cardinal fans, just a reminder, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Right before the break, we mentioned Keon Young, not including Louisville in his top 10. The four-star safety released a top 10 just a little over a week ago. That included Auburn, Florida, Kentucky, Michigan State, Missouri, Oregon, Tennessee, Texas A&M, South Florida, and West Virginia. Keon Young actually decommitted from South Florida after being pledging to the Bulls program, and since then his recruitment has gone up and up. But the Cardinals are not in the mix here as of right now, and I think that it's safe to say that just because there is a top 10 release does not really mean much. I mean, it kind of does, but it doesn't at the same time. A top 10 is literally like an offers list, in my opinion. The top 3, top 4, top 5, now we're talking a little bit more significant. But top 10, what that screams to me is that the recruitment is still open. So, one thing I would caution is that, he released a top 10, Louisville's not in it, they're not going to be involved. That is probably not true. Now, does this mean that they're automatically going to be included back into the mix or try to get into the mix? We'll see. But it's safe to say that the 6-foot safety from Lakeland, Florida, ranked 279th in the country according to the 24/7 Sports Composite, 21st best safety, top 50 recruit in the state of Florida, is a player that a lot of programs are going after. The Cardinals just offered actually today, February 25th, and it was a reoffer. So the Cardinals had not offered him in the Jeff Brom era. So Satterfield must have offered early on. His recruiting profile actually doesn't go back as far, but Brom reoffered. So a couple things that are going to be focused on here. Two things. Number one, where does he visit in the spring? Because if Louisville can get an unofficial visit in the spring, you are starting the trajectory of trying to get back involved. But number two, and this is the more important thing, official visit. I've gone as far as saying that if Louisville is truly serious about a player, and this will really get more and more true, as we head into like June and July when players start making their official visits. If a player schedules an official visit, more importantly, let me rephrase, if Louisville brings a recruit onto an official visit, more often than not, they're closing the deal. It happened in the 2023 class at the end. It happened in the 2024 class. It happens in the transfer portal. The MO of the staff is that they aren't really wasting a ton of time on players that they don't feel like there is a solid chance for them to reel in. So I think that for a lot of these names, and we're going to identify and mention and discuss a plethora of different recruits over the next couple months heading up until the spring game on April 19th. That's us doing our due diligence. That's us having the conversation and talking about the different players. So if a player does end up making a visit unofficially or officially, you'll have heard of that player to where you can think back, oh, I heard on the Locked On Louisville podcast who that player was. And I'm not really trying to toot my own horn or pat myself on the back or make it seem like I'm more important than I am. What I'm trying to do is what I've always tried to do, and that's keep you all informed. I'm really not I'm not a huge fan of hot take culture, just, making statements to get reactions. That's really not me. And if you were looking for that in this podcast, I mean, yeah, we'll make takes, but a lot of these takes are going to be backed up by statistics and facts and non-disputables, or at least justifiable conclusions. A lot of this is going to be informational, though. I want you all to know about these players, so when they are making visits to the spring game or they're making officials back in or up in the summer, you can go back and think, oh, this was a guy that Louisville wasn't included in his top 10, but the Cardinals put the full court press on him. They got an opportunity, and now that hard work is paying off. So, but I think that it would be huge if they could, because Keon Young is a baller. 6 foot safety, reminds me a ton of Gerard Holloman in the way that he is able to read the quarterback, understand his placement on the field, and just be in the right spot at the right time. Solid hands. There seemingly are magnets in his gloves that attract the football being thrown from the opposing quarterback, because I feel like his whole huddle tape is just straight interceptions. Just does a good job of understanding the play, being in the right spot, plays sort of in that center field role, like a Gerard Holloman is the name that I keep coming back to here. Solid hands, solid speed and athleticism. Not the greatest size, being at 6 feet tall, but not bad size either. So this makes a lot of sense to me. And a defensive back from the state of Florida, that's a pretty solid player, from Lakeland, Florida. I think that he's transferred high schools, if I'm not mistaken, but I could be wrong. But Lakeland, for those who don't know, is just east of Tampa, which is a hotbed for recruiting. I found it interesting. Brian Smith, Locked On Podcast Network national recruiting analyst, 2 episodes ago, we talked about defensive backs from Florida, and he said that he made a comment that, you can throw a stone at, in the area and, find, or you could throw a stone at, I don't know how he said it, but it was like there's a highly ranked cornerback a stone's throw away at any high school in Tampa. That's what he said, because I think he lived around the Tampa area. He said, a good cornerback in the city of Tampa is just a stone's throw away from any area that you're standing. So, excuse me. I think that it makes sense. Keon Young, very, very good player. And I'm excited to see if Louisville can get involved in this recruitment. But it's not going to be easy. And if you want to take the next step as a program and recruit these players in a different stratosphere than what you're used to recruiting, then you're going to have these battles that you're going to have to win. You have to have your NIL infrastructure in place, which it seems like for all intents and purposes that Louisville does. And you have to be able to go that extra mile to build that relationship and get that commitment. It's not going to be easy, but it will be worth it. And at the end of the day, that's what it all kind of boils down to. So we'll see if Louisville will be able to get involved with Keon Young after he released his top 10. So we'll put football recruiting to the side for the moment, and we'll dive into a weekly mailbag. Before we do that, I do want to take this time to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder that the show is free on all streaming services, including YouTube, 5 days a week, your team every day. If you're tuning in on YouTube, I definitely appreciate it. Drop a comment in the YouTube section. Ask any questions you may have for the next mailbag. For those who like to listen audio as well, we are changing streaming services as a network, so there will be a delay. The YouTube videos will air Sunday evening. The audio will air Monday afternoon on all streaming services outside of that. So just wanted to give a slight heads up, but that will be the only delay on Monday. It will not occur for the remainder moving forward. We're just changing streaming platforms. So diving into a weekly mailbag. It's been a little while since we've had one. Want to dive into some of the great questions that we have. We start out on the basketball side. It's very blunt here. Do you think Kenny Payne gets a third year? I would recommend, because these are posting pretty closely together, go back and listen to the most recent episode discussing Rick Bozich's article about Kenny Payne in a possible year 3 if 2 5-star recruits can have any say in it. I said that I don't know what's going to happen. Personally, for me, I don't think he's going to get the year 3. That's just completely intuition, no inside info. I don't think he's going to get the year 3. So, but we will see. What would be the basis of getting a year 3? Like I mentioned in that episode, I don't know. I mean, Josh Hurd, the athletic director, keeps things very close to chest to where, he said back in January that Louisville has to start winning games. That's going to be looked at, but how many games were to be won? Is winning 3 games in the next 2 months acceptable? Most fans would probably say, oh man, of course not. But there are some that believe that it's a pretty decent chance that he comes back. It's completely up in the air and it's not set in stone. So ultimately, I think that it's going to be all depending on what Josh Hurd believes, is if Kenny Payne can get Louisville back to the level that it's used to being. And I think that is what it starts with and ends with. So we will see. Baseball has struggled throughout. They are 3-4 after struggling in the first game against St. Bonaventure. They won the next 3. Are you worried about Louisville baseball this year? It's early, but yeah, I mean, pitching has shown no signs of being great. The bullpen struggled just like it did last year. It looks like personnel-wise, the bullpen's sort of kind of the same, but the bats have come alive recently. But the first 2 weekends of the year, not necessarily encouraging. So moving forward, I mean, granted, I think it might be too early to tell on February 25th, but there is some concern. The bullpen, once again, pitching is not good. The starting pitching, not good. Hitting is hit or miss. I think that Louisville needs to play the younger guys. Zion Rose, Luke Moore should be everydayers in the Cardinals offense. So I don't know. I mean, I'm concerned, but I'm willing to give it a little bit of time before I slam the panic button. But it makes no mistake. I think Louisville has to start handling business because you're going to ruin your RPI, ruin your chances at the postseason if you keep losing to these teams that you have early on in the season in which you're supposed to build that resume. So right now, I'm kind of struggling with it. So with baseball, women's basketball, and other sports losing, I don't feel like we're giving the same energy to those coaches that we are giving to Kenny Payne in terms of criticism. I mean, here's the thing for me. Jeff Walls and Dan McDonnell both resurrected two programs respectively. Wallace has been the GOAT for Louisville women's basketball. Dan McDonnell built Louisville baseball. I think that there's urges here. Look, I mean, women's basketball is, I mean, they made it to the Elite Eight last year, Final Four the year before. They lost to Virginia. Now, this team might not necessarily be the greatest team, and they might not host, but I think that, they could potentially get a 5 seed, maybe a 4 seed in the tournament. Are they going to make it to the Final Four? Perhaps not. There is some criticism to be had, but because of past success, you get a little bit of a pass. There are some criticism, but you do get a little bit of a pass. Same with Dan McDonnell. The guy's taken the team to the College World Series, 5 times? Maybe 6? I forget. I think it's 5 times, 13, 14, 17, 19, 07. Yeah, 5 times. And multiple super regionals as well. Now, if they miss the tournament this year, that will be 3 years missed tournament in the last 4. 3 in the last 4. And that would be challenging to accept. And then you're having a conversation, okay, something has to change. But it's all based on the previous success that both these coaches have had. They're not, prevented from receiving criticism, but they have, put in the successes that Kenny Payne just doesn't have. Kenny Payne is a first-time head coach, and he's 12-47. He doesn't have that previous success to be able to fall back on. So, and we saw, I think the same thing was given to Chris Mack. When Chris Mack took over 2019, you made the tournament. 2020, you would have, but 2021, you didn't. And you didn't have much to stand on there. It was like, okay, that's it. You have to make the tournament next year. And he ended up leaving middle through the season. Now, granted, he quit, and I think that there was some behind-the-scenes stuff that made him not want to be the coach anymore, but they were going to make the tournament. So regardless if he resigns or negotiates about it or whatever, Chris Mack wasn't going to be the coach in 2022, 2023. So it's all about that past success. I mean, we're talking about decades, multiple decades of sustained success. A down season here and there. And even, I mean, women's basketball is still going to make the tournament. Baseball, who knows, but we'll have that conversation at a different time. But no, I don't think that there should be the right amount of criticism, because at this point, the only thing Kenny Payne has done in his Louisville career is go 12-47. So there's levels to it. But at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. So if you have any questions for the mailbag, be sure to drop them in the comments below on YouTube or under the post on Twitter. That is going to wrap up today's episode of the show. Everyone have a great day. We'll see you right back here